If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Hi, welcome to the Dance Resource Podcast. My name is Alexa Lopez. I am your host. Today we're talking about belly dance with a very special guest. Christine Sahin is here with us.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Christine Shaheen, and I've been doing Raqs Sharqi, which is Arabic for belly dancing, for 16 years now, since I was 14. And I do it professionally, and then I also have my PhD in critical dance studies. I'm also a belly dance ethnographer and do all my field work in contemporary Cairo context of the dancing.
Wow. Okay. So how exactly did you get into belly dance?
Okay, that's a long time ago. I started when I was 14 years old. It took me a while to convince my mom that it was a dance form that was like okay to take as a young girl. I used to listen to music from all over the world when I was younger, and for some reason I didn't really know anything about belly dancing, but it was really like this magnetic soul pull that I felt like I just knew like I have to do this thing. I have to, even though I really didn't know anything about it. So I think it was destiny. So I finally started taking classes and I was 14 and every other woman in the class was probably like in her late 30s or 40s, like a lot of, soccer mom types. And I just loved it, liked being around these older women and just, getting to feel like a woman with them and dancing. And then when I was 17, I started dancing professionally in local like Arab American restaurants and nightclubs. And that opened the door to a whole lot of Arab American and Manat, meaning Middle Eastern, North African, Turkish circulations of the dance. And that's when I really wanted to go down the rabbit hole. That's when I was like, wow, there's so much more to this dance. Than I ever could have imagined, and has so much more beauty and power than I could have imagined. So I just wanted to learn a lot more and understand it better. So then I became an Arab Studies and Language minor in undergrad and cultural anthropology major. Then after college, I kind of traveled the Middle East and Turkey for a while, and then even got the PhD at UC Riverside in critical dance studies, and now just doing dance ethnography and still have been dancing and teaching professionally that whole time.
That's so cool. For our audience, can you define dance ethnography for us, please?
Oh, dance ethnography. Okay, so it's if you know what anthropology is, it's like anthropology, but you're using a dance lens to look at it. So dance ethnography is you're really trying to go into a community and understand how they see life, how they see the dance, how they, what social issues they're dealing with, and how to kind of work to solve them from their perspectives. So dance ethnography is kind of learning about a dance community by immersing yourself in it, interviewing people, learning the dance yourself, maybe doing the dance with other people, to kind of get their perspective on it, or just a non-dominant, non-stereotypical perspective.
Okay. So what was your focus during your days in Egypt?
Okay, so I first, it's a little crazy. I first went to Cairo with one of my main teachers, Sahra, in 2013 when Morsi was president, and there was very little dancing, and it was a very conservative politically tumultuous time to be in Cairo. And then I went back in depth from like 2015 until like today, for extended periods of time because I do my field work there. So I really, like other dancers, I'll go there to study the dancing and train with different dancers, but I also really focus on researching the dance from, kind of a more dance studies, dance ethnography perspective. So I really do a lot of interviews with a lot of dancers and other people in the dance industry and just everyday kind of people to get their perspectives on dance. And I do my training, I try to train with people that others might not even consider studying with. And then just going to see so many different types of performances and just observing it, aesthetically, but also kind of academically looking at different power circulations going on and different interactions on stage, off stage, and how it relates to different issues, maybe around gender, class, nationalism. So and then just you're living there too. So I was taking like language classes every day to learn the language more and just, be fully like immersed in that life in those communities. But yeah, it was a lot of listening, a lot of learning. As a solo dancer, I usually am on stage by myself, like giving out. But when I go there to research, I'm really sitting down a lot in the back corners of cabarets or bars or nightclubs and really just kind of listening through watching and observing kind of the knowledge other people have. So I loved it, just getting to see all the dance in its different, colors and forms in Cairo.
And how would you describe belly dance, like movement-wise, for everyone that maybe are not familiar with belly dance?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, it's like asl, which is like, it means honey in Arabic. It's like, it's ooey, it's gooey, it's luscious. It's you can like slow things down and savor it like trickling honey. It's to me the most beautiful movement in the world, but I'm obviously biased. It's like a fully embodied embracement of owning and loving and being confident in your own body, whatever body you have. And that's what I really love about it, because when you see a dancer that just fully embraces who they are, every inch of their body, it's just the most powerful thing. It's also a lot of percussive and serpentine articulations and isolations of the torso, mainly like hips, belly, chest, shoulders. So it's a lot of polycentric movement, like either just moving the chest or just moving the hips. And the arms can frame and flourish movements, and there's some steps, but it's really kind of all about the core of the body. And then it's also, the biggest thing is that it's, the dancer should be like a musical embodiment of the music. So you have to work within the structure of the manat music you're dancing to. And I think that's something that makes the dance really special, is being able to kind of embody the music with your body and find creativity and freedom within that structure.
Nice. Okay, so can we talk about some history of belly dance?
History? Okay.
Like when and where was belly dance like formed, and how did like it flourish and everything?
Okay, so this is a complicated, controversial question, of course. Especially for me, my research, I focus on Egypt, but there's also like some really dominant styles and roots in like Turkey, Lebanon, other places. But for sure, it's a Manat, Middle Eastern, North African, Turkish dance form. That's where it kind of developed. And I studied Raqs Sharqi, which is definitely primarily came out of Egypt, in Cairo and Alexandria. Only in like the late 1800s, early 1900s did the dance form kind of eventually converge into its own genre, where it was being called Raqs Sharqi for the first times. So it's definitely not an ancient dance, which a lot of people think it is. It's actually really interesting because it constantly is adapting to whatever is going on in society, music-wise or socially, with fashion trends at the time. And there was a lot of different influences in it. So there was like urban social dancing, which would be called Bellidi in Arabic. So it's really grounded in social contexts and movements and conditions. It also pulls influences from a lot of international concert dances, even like Latin American dances, ballroom, ballet, because it kind of developed in these new venues to house dancing entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
And there was all other kinds of entertainment and dance happening in those spaces too. And then also other professional entertainers from Egypt and the Middle East and Turkey, like Gawazi and Awelum, are two names you can think of them as having a strong kind of root influence on the dance, that were professional entertainers. So all those things kind of eventually like snowballed together, and then it became rock sharky. And that's a good point to bring up, is that historically and still socially throughout time, it was a dance done by like all genders, all ages. It only with like commercialization kind of became more gendered feminine.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and now that we're talking about like the roles in like man versus women, like what are their roles with men and women? Like, because I know like when I think belly dance, I just think like a woman. I don't really like think man. So like, what do men do? Like, what are their roles with men as well?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So, like I said, like historically, the professional entertainers, they it was inclusive of all genders, but there were gender distinct roles. Like Joel were like male entertainers, or Ginks were male identifying performers, whereas like Rouazi and Awelum were female identifying performers. Even if they did similar movement vocabulary and danced in a similar way, they had distinct gender identities, as far as I know right now. And then and socially, because it's so grounded socially, when you look at belly dancing, all ages and genders do the same movements. There's no stigmatization of that. It's when it's done socially, it's just like you get the stigma and kind of the erasure of the male dancing body when you get into certain contexts of the dancing, like the media, when you're looking at like Hollywood films in Egypt and the US, or when you're looking in professional commercialized performance contexts like nightclubs and hotels or even restaurants here in the States. That's because when you get into the more commercialized venues, then you're catering a lot more to like global heteropatriarchy and all these other kind of things that are a lot more restrictive than the original context. But I also do personal training and fitness. So anatomically, physically speaking, the dance is completely inclusive and open to any body, regardless of gender or anything. And everyone's supposed to have their unique style with it. So it's not one of those really rigid technical forms where if you do a movement, it has to look exactly like ABC. It's beautiful that everyone has their own take and style on it, which makes sense because it's coming from these social contexts. So it's, I guess, what are the roles of them is, yeah, I mean, they can do, it's just totally open. Some people want to dance in a style they deem more masculine. Some want to dance in a style they deem more feminine, but it's really open to everything. And it was just kind of global heteropatriarchy and a lot of other issues that kind of erased the male dancing body, but it's still always been there throughout time. But it is important to realize that, hey, we do think of it as a woman. And primarily, I think around the world, people being paid to perform the dance in commercial contexts are mostly those who identify as women. So it is something to kind of try to keep challenging and being more open to.
So you mentioned this, like the context, like the original context versus the commercial context. So in the commercial context, it's mostly performed in cabarets and like nightclubs and stuff like that. So what would be the original context?
Gosh, maybe original wasn't the best word to use, but like, I mean, like if you're looking at some of the roots of the, before it kind of snowballed into its own genre, like Gawezi and Awelum and Joel, they were professional entertainers. A lot of times they were dancing kind of at coffee shops or more open festivals or street cafes and things like that. And then, yeah, it's just like almost as soon as it became known as rock sharky, that's when it got wrapped up into all those other dynamics because it became its own in these new venues that were obviously commercial venues. People had to pay to get in to see shows. So pretty much from the start, but if you look at it in the social context, or people dancing at weddings or parties, then you can still see that it's a lot more inclusive and open and more fluid with gender roles and things like that.
So, for like Hollywood, I'm getting like my things kind of mixed up. Okay, so there's this thing called Orientalism that I went over in my, it was a modern dance episode. So do you think that Western, like Hollywood, plays into the Orientalism aspect of belly dance, or like how do you like see that?
That's an awesome kind of connection to make. So thank you for that. Yes. I have one of the notes here, like how has the Western world portrayed belly dance in Hollywood? And I just like my automatic answer is I want to say Orientalist cheese fest. Like it's just like a cheese fest a lot of the times, which is really sad because it's a really powerful dance capable of doing so much, and it gets just so reduced and characterized in Hollywood in the West, which is a shame and problematic. So yes, very much. I think one of the biggest issues with belly dancing in the US is that it kind of came here hand in hand with Orientalism, which I know you've already discussed, but again, that's like the Palestinian scholar Edward Said. This is kind of his pioneering theory that a lot of Middle Eastern feminist scholars have then even expanded to make it even more relevant and inclusive. But it's like a power dynamic between, you know, quote unquote, the West and the East, including like Asia, the Middle East, where it's more than just like making the Middle East into stereotypes, but those stereotypes are usually, you know, that the Middle East is exotic, barbaric, it's ancient or unchanging, and that it's feminine. So you can totally see how our commercialized ideas of belly dance play right into that. But it's even more than that. It's a like relationship of power where you've created this hierarchy and division where you're saying, okay, we're going to identify ourselves as civilized and better by othering someone else and making them less than. So it's something really important to be aware of, and a lot of dance forms that it has engaged with and continues to engage with. So yeah, I think with Hollywood, there's a lot of those Orientalist kind of portrayals. Like you'll just think of like magic carpets, genies, and it just ends up looking cheesy. And even like the commercial context of dancing here, then it filters into how the dance is performed and received. So like a lot of people just, you know, if you're dancing at a restaurant here for like, I don't know, let's just say some like average white folk. I don't know if that's a good term to use, but you know, it's like then like Uncle Bob would like just get up and he'll take off his shirt to show off his beer belly and just kind of jiggle it around, and people, and then everyone laughs, and that's what they think of belly dance. Like it's just like a cheese fest, and it's like everyone does the same thing. I've seen it 1,000 times, and it's not funny. It's just, you know, it's cheesy. Whereas like in the Middle East, it's stigmatized and policed a lot more. But I think at the same time, it's because they recognize it's so powerful. It has so much power, and it's taken so much more seriously as an art form and entertainment industry than it is here. And that Hollywood thing is really important because I've actually read dance ethnographies, so I wonder if you've talked to anyone else that noticed this. I think it was with salsa. But people like me that have been on the East Coast and then have come to the West Coast, especially California, they've kind of described it as like this Hollywoodization of the dance. So even the way the dance is performed is affected by that. And I feel like in California with belly dancing, it's striking. Like it was like culture shock when I first came here and saw it. So on the East Coast, you know, a lot of the dance is about connecting with the music and your audience, and you just have to have a lot of interaction and charisma. Like it's really just about feelings and charisma. Here on the West Coast, you have to do your show with like 6 different props. You know, you don't really need any of that on a lot of the East Coast places. Like here, you have to dance with fire props, which is like totally different. And I was shocked by that because I'm like, but California is like always having wildfires. It seems so dangerous. It seems dangerous. You have to do all these LED props, like big like ISIS wings and things. And And then you'll see a lot of people here still really do the Orientalist cheese, like they'll do sultan's acts, which I think is completely inappropriate, and they'll wear like
What is that?
bindis. Sultan's acts, it's kind of like they'll take a guy out from the audience, put him on a chair, and they dress him up, and they'll usually put like an Indian kind of Aladdin looking hat on him.
Oh.
Like it's not even Middle
Oh.
Eastern.
Yeah.
It's mixing, and a lot of times these dancers might be wearing bindis, which is also like India. Like
Indian,
it's just
yeah.
just mixing the whole, quote unquote East together. It's really problematic. And I remember sometimes just catching my breath when I saw some things here and was like, this still happens? Really? Like, why? So yeah, I don't, that's what I mean by Sultan's Act. And that has a different like history in Turkey, but I'm just talking about it within a US Orientalist context. And then even just, it's mostly a solo improv dance, but on the West Coast in California, you'll see a lot more group choreographies. It's just more, it becomes less about feeling and connection with the music and connection with like an Arab American audience, and more about like spectacle and theatricalization, which there's nothing wrong with in and of itself. It's just a different context. But at the same time, I think it does lose something. Even though you can still have all that, even if you're dancing with 10 different fire and LED props, you can definitely still have it, but there's definitely that dynamic you have to negotiate if you're here. So it goes beyond media influence and affects the dance. Yeah.
It's kind of like the dance itself is more, it becomes the prop, and the prop becomes like the main thing. Like, I don't know, that's how like I see it. Like if you have all this focus on your prop that you're dealing with, dance is just a dance now. Like it's not even like about belly dance now. Correct? I don't know.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. It's just that there's so much power in the dance because it brings people together. Like it's amazing. You have this solo woman really exposed, and she's able to bring this whole room of people and get them wrapped up together in like a Fairuz song or Kulthum song. And especially like if some calamity has happened in like one of the countries of origin, like there was, something terrible happened in Beirut, then that same night at the nightclub, if a song comes on by a famous like Fairuz like or Lebanese singer, and the dancer can like embody the lyrics and meaning and connect with people, the sense of solidarity and togetherness that's created is just like, oh,
it's beautiful.
Sorry, I get emotional. It's just like mind-blowing.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, your mind can be blown with like LED lights and stuff too, but I think as long as you have to have at least some of that in it still, otherwise Orientalism's, taking over too much.
All right, so let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we're going to discuss why belly dance has a bad reputation and how we as a society can get together and end the stigma. And we're back. So we're going to discuss why belly dance has a bad reputation in certain parts of the world / like cultures. Okay, so how is Egypt dealing with belly dancers today?
Okay, this is a really huge question about the bad reputation. I think just to start, I think the belly dancing is, I think it's stigmatized pretty much everywhere that it happens, but to different degrees and for different reasons, depending on the context and like what kind of dynamics it's negotiating. So Egypt especially is kind of, quote unquote, the mother country, and still is kind of like, the homeland of the dance in a lot of ways. It's still very much stigmatized there. And I think it's so policed and stigmatized, but I think at the same time you have to acknowledge that it's because it's taken so seriously as an entertainment industry there. Like you can become like a star celebrity figure there.
Oh, wow.
And have a lot of influence and power, and dancers have even like throughout history wielded that power for political issues and reasons. So I want to say, like, yes, it can be more heavily stigmatized in Egypt and Menat countries and cultures, but I think it's also because it has or is recognized to have so much more power there, if that makes sense. So I don't want to, I'm just worried about that Orientalism dynamic. I don't want people thinking, oh, it's because those cultures are, less civilized or something, because it's quite not at all what I'm saying. So like in the US, like we were talking about with Orientalism, I think, it's still primarily practiced as a hobbyist dance form here, and primarily practiced by female identifying people. And I think a lot of times the problem with that is, even in learning, you find your self-empowerment through the dance, but problematically, you partially at least are doing that by othering Middle Eastern women and cultures and dancers. And I don't think that's sustainable or inclusive in the long run. And you kind of get that cheesiness here, and that's just so unfortunate, because it's such a far cry from like the lived reality of Egyptian dancers and what they go through in Egypt. Like these, like if you're looking for some badass role models, Egyptian dancers are gonna be they gotta be at the top of your list, because really, having done all the research I have there and talked to dancers from the most local working class cabarets, talking with sex workers, talking all the way up to like the most famous dancers working in the fanciest 5-star hotels, like they're just across the board, they deal with so much like stuff, but they just keep doing what they love because they're so sure of who they are and what they're doing. Even though they have all this pressure from society saying you're wrong, you shouldn't be doing this, they still get up there and do it, either because they love it or because they need to economically to make ends meet, but they just find a way. So I think that's really empowering. So right now in Cairo, there's always kind of been this tension going on with a lot of the recent kind of presidencies. It's between appeasing, when you want to go more secular with the leadership, but still appeasing those more fundamentalist in society. And again, you get fundamentalists in all religions and all cultures and communities. So right now, what's happening since like President Sisi's come to power, and who's been in power for a while and probably will stay that way, is that a lot of times what you've seen as a trend in Egypt is when a more secular president comes on board, they'll try to appease fundamentalists by cracking down on marginalized communities. So the like queer community, belly dancers, youthful revolutionaries, all kind of gets clumped together as like these are the outsiders of idealized society, so let's crack down and police them more heavily and make a big deal out of it so we can calm down these other sectors of society. So it's like they're just so policed in a political way that's really hard to deal with. And then the other trend that I've been looking at is in Egypt, but this is actually a trend that you see in the whole world, is whenever you have a war effort or a revolutionary effort, like Egypt had their 2011 revolution or uprising, is that, like, again, because I primarily work with women professional performers, what you see is that women are integral to those efforts to make them successful, like revolutionary efforts or war efforts. And women do so by taking on far more diverse like roles and responsibilities than what's considered ideal or normative for their gender. But then once the kind of state gets what it wants, it finishes, the revolution or the war, one of the first things you'll notice throughout history around the world is that it's women's roles and rights that usually are one of the first areas to then be controlled and policed almost immediately. So I'm like, if you look at that again right there, there is something so powerful that these communities have that, that's necessary for huge drastic change, but then it's threatening. So let's keep it under control as soon as we get what we want from them. So for example, with economics in Egypt, it's necessitating work outside the home more and more for women as well as men, but this is still stigmatized to some extent. And then if you look at a belly dancer in Egypt, like this is like the opposite of what ideal society would want a woman to do. She's fully embracing her dynamic self, not just as like a sexual being, but full of emotions, full of power, full of leadership and sexuality and all these things. She's in control of an all male band behind her. She's in control of maybe male backup folkloric dancers behind her. and is able to command and change the energy in an entire room with her solo spotlighted dancing body. So I mean, like, that is a huge threat, if you're trying to keep things under control, kind of for, like, the heteropatriarchy or whatever. So you see, again, dancers being so policed and controlled right now in Cairo. Even all the news now has been so focused on Corona. There's been some articles here and there about dancers getting arrested again in Cairo, or dancers being deported from Cairo for doing something quote unquote illicit or debaucherous, is what the kind of terms they'll use. But again, it's just because they're a threat, because they have so much power.
What are the ways that they get policed? Like how, like, I don't know, how does that work?
Okay. So there's policing kind of more like directly legally. So there is like kind of laws and regulations they have to follow. Whether or not they're enforced depends kind of on the time and a lot of other factors. Like, you're supposed to wear a shebaka, which means like a belly. It's kind of like a belly cover or stocking. Which, of course, when you think of a belly dancer, you think of an exposed belly, but technically you're supposed to have that covered. You're supposed to wear under shorts that are a certain length and amount of coverage, to not be too scandalous. Your costuming isn't supposed to be too obscene, but whatever that means, who gets to decide what's obscene or not? Your movements aren't supposed to be too indecent. If you're dancing on a stage, there's actually a regulation that if the dancer steps off stage, she could be arrested for eliciting prostitution. So, like, just like those regulations alone are burdening this, female with so much suspect criminal sexuality and things that she has to negotiate that we don't have here in the same way. So the dancers there have to be aware of all these things and negotiate them, and be able to use their charisma, use their improvisational skills to think on their feet, try to get out of these situations when they happen. And then even bigger than that, dancers have been arrested and deported just if they go viral for a reason that's deemed not appropriate by the government. What else was I going to say about that? Okay, I was going to say something else. I lost my track.
Oh no, I'm sorry. Okay. Let's see.
Oh, I was okay. And then,
yeah, go.
Sorry. So not just like there's like the direct policing of dancers, but then there's also, like, of course, the social policing too. So of course, Egypt is really confusing because there's like a love-hate relationship with the dance that's really hard to kind of swallow. It's like there's like a saying, like, everybody wants a dancer at their wedding to embody joy and bring the celebration. Like, you have to have a dancer at your wedding or it's not going to be a good party. But like, nobody wants their son to be the one marrying the dancer. So that's kind of a way to grasp that contradiction. And a lot of the Egyptian dancers I've interviewed with have went through so much abuse from their families or from relationships they've been in, from like just trying to rent an apartment and getting kicked out by their landlords when they find out what their job is. And just these horrible stories, but they'll just keep going on stage because they just love it and they're so sure that it's not wrong and that's what they're meant to be doing and it makes them happy and they see it as a beautiful thing. So just being able to have that strength and like trust in yourself is just like mind-blowing to me.
What would you say are like some differences how these dancers are policed, based on like how successful they are or like how famous they are versus like the ones that are just more like less successful or like less like famous or something? I don't know if that makes sense, but
oh yeah, no, that's an awesome. I love your questions. Thank you for that. Yeah, so a lot of the times what makes the headlines is when a foreign dancer, there's a lot of Eastern European dancers performing in Cairo right now. So a lot of times when one of them gets deported, it's like a big deal and makes the headlines when it's a more like well-off dancer that has access to a lot of privileges and a lot of, backup resources. And often what happens is they'll just go home and become a famous teacher on the international belly dance teaching circuit, or they'll just go to a different country and start working there and get gigs right away because of the scandal. It actually makes them more famous.
Oh.
But and that's what we hear about and see a lot. But really, the worst, most intense, constant policing happens to more working class dancers in cabaret contexts and dancers that are Egyptian, not foreign. And a lot of the Egyptian dancers, just because of histories and legacies of colonialism, imperialism, global capitalism, they don't have access to the privileges and resources that a lot of the foreigners coming in do. I mean, just think about it. Like, you're literally going into someone else's country, to
Mhm.
be to work. It's like a huge privilege and freedom. So whereas a lot of Egyptian dancers, if they don't have the right education, they were not even allowed to get a visa to leave the country. If they don't have enough money in the bank, they can't even get a visa to leave their country. So it's just a
Mhm.
completely uneven playing field, because of these structures of inequality. And I think that's important to just recognize and call attention to, and just be aware of.
Yeah. And was this was it always like this, like the heavy policing, or did it come after, like, in certain time, or like how did it like become like this way?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. My research is so focused on the contemporary, so
Mhm.
I hope I don't get anything wrong here. But pretty much as soon as the dance form crystallized into what it was, known as Raksharki, especially because it was happening when it came into its own, it was happening in these new performance venues. So once you put it in like a private building, you can regulate it and you can police it more, as
Hmm.
opposed to like a street wedding where you can just set up some colorful fabric, have a wedding, and then boom, take it all down like it never happened. So when things get more under the government's eye, they're going to be more controlled and policed. So as soon as the dance kind of came into its own, it's always been policed and regulated. And I think it's because, like, artists, especially if they're like from a marginalized community, like a lot of female performers, it's because we do have so much power. So it's seen as a threat for a lot of different reasons. But as always throughout the history, you see that the dancers are so clever in finding ways to always kind of wiggle around those structures. Like sometimes there was like red lights, they would flash lights when they saw that someone from the government was about to come in to check the venue.
Oh,
So then
wow.
everyone would know and like go off stage or do whatever they needed to do, or they just bribe the people. Or like, like, oh, you have to wear a belly covering, but then they'll make it into this really cute, sexy, strappy thing that's technically covering their belly, but it kind of looks like lingerie, so it's actually even more sexy, which is kind of defeating the purpose. So it's like whenever they try to make a new way of controlling, it's like the dancers will always find a way around it, which I think is just really clever and badass. And like we can learn a lot from that if we look at it and take those skills at a larger kind of political level.
And how would you say that the US kind of contributes to that sexualization, um and also the healing of like women, like
Oh, yeah, I love these questions that you're asking. They're so great. Um, and I love that you're seeing it like both ways, because a lot of times that's how it is. It's like dance is doing this, but also this other thing, and it can be happening simultaneously. There's a lot of contradictions that can happen in dance, which is why it's so awesome. It's like so neat, especially to study. So I think, yeah, with the U.S., the sexualization and that Orientalism really go hand in hand. And I think you just have to be so careful to not find your self-empowerment through othering other bodies, other people,
Yes.
other communities, other cultures at large. And it's not just even cultures, it's also, and you'll see this in a lot of dance forms, we create hierarchies and divisions constantly.
Mhm.
Oh, we're studio trained, they're street trained or socially trained. Or, oh, what we're doing is sensual, but we're not sexual. There's a lot of slut shaming that you'll see in belly dancing too. Even in Cairo, like 5-star dancers talking down on the local cabaret dancers.
Oh, wow.
And I think the only thing hierarchies do, really, like historically, is they divide. Like they just create these divisions that, if you're really looking for some self-empowering feminism, you have to focus on what's a sustainable feminism and inclusive. Because
Mm-hmm.
like if you look at like revolutionary ruptures, what makes them so powerful is like there's like this bubble that happens where everyone kind of works together, and there's like all these grassroots cross alliances made between different groups and women-led coalitions and things like that immediately get broken up as soon as the people in charge get back their power. So in Egypt, there was all these diverse women's movements and grass-led coalitions that worked across different religious divides, that worked across class divides, and they got stuff done. But then as soon as the government gained control, they reinstated state feminism, which is where one government agency is in charge of basically all women's issues. And there's no independent organizing really allowed. So it looks like they're doing the right thing, but really it's so controlled and monolithic. Like there's, my way or the highway. So, but we do that same thing in dance, that like my way or the highway, like this is the right way, these other people are wrong or they're not as good as us. So in regards to like just sexualization and marginalization, I think you have to find your self-empowerment in ways that bring everyone else up with you.
Yes.
So especially because the dance is so much about connection and togetherness when you're performing, keep that energy going. Don't talk down on other dancers because you think their movements are too vulgar or whatever it is. Just be really careful of that, especially because in the US, it's very elitist and whitewashed belly dancing. So we'll look at only the top 10% of dancers in Cairo or the Middle East and Turkey. Like we'll look at the really famous 5-star celebrity dancers, and we don't even have access a lot of times to the really local working class circuits of the dance, which is what most of it is. And there's nothing wrong with that. It makes it extremely important to understand more. But we have a problem in the US, which is Orientalism again. If we don't have access to something, we think it doesn't exist. Yeah. Like if we can't see it and know it and be able to define and control it, it must not be out there or be legitimate. And that itself is Orientalism, where you're giving yourself the power to, define what is and isn't. So I think that's a big thing that belly dancers and just dancers in general can work on. As for healing, I think there's, again, so many ways that it's healing for US women. Like just my first class, just the fact that it's typically a hobbyist community in the US, but of older practitioners. So how many times do you drive around and see a dance studio in the US that's not primarily geared towards children? Most of them, it's like, okay, dancing is something you do when you're a kid and then you got to stop it. So the fact that this dance is just a carved out time for pleasure and to just love yourself for an older population, I think is really important and challenging to ideas of dance and aging here in the US. Just to embrace your own sexuality. Like, we're taught, oh, you're not supposed to, your body's supposed to look a certain way. You're not supposed to have things shaking or shimmying or, rolls. But in belly dance, it's like, yeah, that's awesome. We love that. If you have it, it's great. If you don't have it, it's great. Just move the way that your body moves, and that's good. And then just, if you're really open to it, like it is like you're moving in the world in a different way, from different cultures. So that can open up to lots of other new perspectives and knowledge. So I think like learning about the culture behind the dance can open up to you to so many more perspectives and ways of beauty and forms of feminism and things like that can be really healing. But I'll stop there.
Okay. And what do you wish people understood about belly dance?
What do I wish they understood? So many things. I guess like just I really wish for belly dancing that people understood the complexity of it and they were able to really contextual. I think if we understood even like just dance generally, if we were able to have a more complex understanding of it and a more contextualized understanding, because I don't think there's any such thing as like belly dance. Like, what's the meaning of belly dance? It's like, well, it depends. Like, are you looking at belly dancing at a cabaret in Beirut in the 1970s, or are you looking, what I mean, at a studio dancer? So it really depends on context. A lot of things like who's dancing, why are they dancing, when are they dancing, where, for whom, what's going on historically, politically at that time. So and that will help to complexify dance, because I really think that dance, it gets romanticized and essentialized too much, that it's just, it's automatically, if people are going to start dancing and the world's going to heal. But it's, like, it's more complicated than that. Like, dancing, it's very powerful, but that power can also be used to marginalize and erase certain communities. Like, it's erased a lot of, male dancers. It's erased a lot of the agency and power of Middle Eastern dancers when you look at it from a US context because of Orientalism. So just that dancing is extremely powerful and beautiful, but that power can go so many ways. So we have a deep responsibility in which way we're stepping that power towards, which way we're swaying it towards, if that makes sense.
And what can we further do to appreciate and not appropriate, just in general, any dance form that is not our dance form? Like, how can we do it in a way that it's appreciative?
That's such a great question too. I think it's important to, especially like right now, it's such a hard time for artists all over the world, like to nourish what you love. So, for me, like, I really wish we did have greater respect and understanding and more of a platform for like Manat dancers. So I'm going to study with Manat dancers, especially now with a lot of online classes, you can do that. I'm going to nourish people from the cultures of origin in all ways that I can. That can be financially, is really important, support, events they do, performances, classes they offer, but also just even just emotionally, mentally, physically, try to learn aesthetics that come from that area and how and why they're so beautiful and important, and just give your support, even if it's, financially, maybe you're unemployed right now, you can still at least like maybe give out like a love or share information or just let someone know you really appreciate what they're doing. And take action. I think that's something we're seeing a lot more now. So if you see a huge international festival, but there's no teachers featured from the Manat, Middle East, North Africa, Turkey, just, hey, shoot the organizer an email, like, hey, I really would love to support your event, but I don't understand why this isn't happening, and people like that has a lot of power too. And then just keep like learning in order to love. And I think, again, that love, it has to be for more than yourself. So your self-empowerment, your own love for yourself, you have to realize that you are part of a like global community. So you've got to try to bring everyone else up with you, or else, as we've been seeing throughout history, it doesn't work. It's not sustainable. It's not inclusive. It's not the world I want to be dancing in. I want everyone to kind of move up together. So yeah, just really focusing on listening, things like podcasts like this, or reading books and articles, seeking out really experienced, knowledgeable teachers, like things like that all make a difference.
Oh, yes. And just finishing this up, for people listening that may be interested in trying like a class or something, like, what are some things that we should look into when searching to take a belly dance class?
Awesome. Okay, I love this question too. Yeah, I think a lot of us, when we started our dance journeys, it probably was like more surface level or kind of superficial. And then as we get deeper into it, we get opened up into the rabbit hole, and then it goes so much deeper and evolves. So I think it's important to honor that and realize it is a journey. So it kind of depends what you're interested in classes. If you're just purely looking to like maybe, for fitness or health reasons, versus like you really enjoy the music, or if you're looking for like self-empowerment, that's going to shape what kind of class you look for. But to always recognize that what you need from the dance is going to change over time. So it's fine to then seek out different teachers or contexts of dancing when you're ready to go deeper. But this is one of the dance forms, I think it's too easily co-opted by people that are doing more harm than good. So look for teachers from the cultures of origin, Middle East, North Africa, Turkey, if you can, with a depth of experience and love for the dancing. If you don't have access to that because of where you live or other things like that. Right now, there's a lot of online classes, so that's really good. Look for someone that at least has, trained either a lot in the Minot context or with teachers of Minot origin, and has a deep love for the dance and is very well educated. I think belly dance, you even have to be careful because I also do fitness and personal training. Just find someone that at least has like basic anatomy understanding so they're not going to physically harm you or injure you in class. A lot of belly dance teachers don't have that as like a basic foundation, which is a little bit scary. But like, you can look from their advertising, look at their websites or flyers or how they market the classes. If they're saying, come learn exotic movements where you can tap into your, ancient inner goddess.
No.
And there's like, little genies and magic carpets and like ancient Greek, white looking goddesses all over their website, then that's probably like a huge red flag that you're going to be getting fed a lot of Orientalism in that class, and that's not good. So really just try to find a safe, inclusive space that's really focused on that, collectivity and not kind of divisions. Like, if you hear that trained versus untrained, meaning, social, or if you hear that's sensual but not sexual. Like if you hear those kind of things, those should kind of be red flags that, okay, this isn't super inclusive. So
yes. And we've come to the end. So what are you working on right now? Like what are you doing in the community? Can you share that with us?
Okay, yeah. So well, right now everything's kind of at a pause in the world, unfortunately, but I teach dance studies at CSU San Marcos, and then I also am teaching belly dance right now at a senior home. It's basically the only time that the seniors are allowed out of their rooms. It's the only kind of activity they're getting. So it's so meaningful to be able to do that. And it's interesting because it's focused a lot more on just community, but also like fitness and health. So it's like, here, if you do these like, pelvic rotations, it'll make it easier to poop. And it's not how we usually would teach a class for other populations. But that's so meaningful right now to be able to do that. And then research wise, my book that's hopefully going to come out, my dance ethnography on embodied knowledge within Cairo belly dance post-revolution, is under review with a really big publisher. So I'm just waiting to, I'll probably have to wait another month or two before hearing if I get the contract or not. And then I just had an article come out in Arabic in a gender studies Beirut-based journal on some of my cabaret dancer research in Cairo. So that was exciting because that's been
cool.
It's been over a year for that to come out. So yeah, and I just like reading and trying to study more and train.
So if people want to connect with you and learn more about this dance form, or like are interested in training with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, great. So I guess my Facebook, you could connect with me there, would be good. And I think if you just, go to Facebook, and I think if you just search my name, Christine, Chrisistine, Sahin, Sahin, then, look for someone that has like belly dance photos and stuff, and then you'll probably know that's me. And I would love to connect with you there, and you can send me a message or anything like that.
All right. Thank you so much for having a word with us today. If you are interested in learning more or asking a question or anything, please go to my Instagram. You can leave us a message there. It's at the Dance Research Podcast, or on Facebook as well. If you want to send us a voice memo, you can go to my Anchor account. It's anchor.fm/the Dance Research Podcast. You can message there and record yourself, and we can play it here, and we can answer more questions for you. All right, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you so much.